My name is Chris, and today I want to tell you about this record. Welcome to the Vinyl Attack. About a month ago, I picked up the Mofi one-step pressing of Stevie Ray Vaughan's Couldn't Stand the Weather. I did a bit of a rundown on Mofi and what they do in a previous video, and then we unboxed the single most expensive brand new album I'd ever purchased. To be sure, $125 is a lot to pay for one record, so this begs the question, was it worth it? As with most things in life, that answer is a very unsatisfying, it depends. Many of you posted a comment on that video and shared your thoughts on it, and I'd say the vast majority of you feel the way that I do. To put that kind of money into one album would mean that not only does that album need to be something that you absolutely love, but the purchase would also depend on the quality of the system on which it's being played. Will you hear the difference between this pressing and a regular pressing on a more budget-minded system? Without a doubt. However, depending on how serious you are about wanting to upgrade, and where you currently are in your musical setup, you may consider saving that $1.25 for a new turntable, cartridge, or speakers rather than a really nice record. So what were my first impressions of this album and the whole one-step system? Well, ironically, silence. Before I noticed anything about the range and dynamics, the placement of the instruments, and the width and depth of the soundstage, I noticed the quiet. The very first drop of the needle greeted me with surprising silence, and this album is not only the quietest one in my collection, but also the quietest one I've ever heard. It's outstanding. The first song, Scuttle Button, jumps right into the sonic experience of the album and sets the tone for the whole thing. The bass extension is deep and driving as Tommy Shannon rolls walking bass lines seamlessly about while you're still easily able to separate the individual instruments in the mix. As a three-piece, it's fairly common to have the bass guitar a little louder to cover the lack of a rhythm guitar and fill out the sound. You'll find that in full effect in this mix, and it works very well. Another trick that's used to fill a space is reverb. I marveled at the ability to hear the verb and delay at the end of this track, much more so than the CD version to which I compared it from time to time, and I felt the sound of the recording of The Room was also evident. While I'm not going to go over every song individually, the title track, Couldn't Stand the Weather, which is the second song of this album, does require some discussion. The subtle, softer guitar intro is lively, while staying out of the way of the cymbals as they join in with lush clarity, and the ride cymbal in particular shows a transience and decay that I wasn't prepared for, and I had to play it over and over several times. You could hear the tip, the nylon tip of the drumstick as it attacked the cymbal during a roll that made you want to hear it more. One of the things people enjoy most about analog records is the lack of heavy compression. When the first snare strike hits on this song, it's almost startling. It's crisp, it is full, and you can hear the tautness of the drumhead, and it's simply delightful. For the remainder of the album, Chris Layton's snare drum will jump when necessary right from the mix almost into your face, but then be as smooth as silk when playing through a verse section as to not draw unnecessary attention. His exceptional playing anchors the band and keeps everything not only right in time, but at the right dynamic as well. Stevie himself, being no slouch in any department, really took center stage with the vocals on this song. The dynamic presence of the vocals stands proudly in the center where it belongs, but never oversteps its boundaries or washes out the other instruments. With my well-adjusted turntable, thanks to my hi-fi guy Chris, I found no sibilance, no harsh top end, and no distracting frequencies anywhere in the mix, and I find that to be the most important in the vocal range. I was not disappointed. Moving to his exceptional guitar work and legendary tone, I was astonished how easy it was to hear him switch from his neck pickup during a lead to the bridge pickup when he wanted that higher energy, more muscular, and brighter tone. I'm normally pretty cognizant of this with years of playing guitar under my own belt, but in this recording it was just much more evident and effective than I thought it would be. The topic of SRV covering Hendrix has been discussed more than 1,000,000 times, I'm sure, so I'll spare you that here, but I will comment on how striking Voodoo Child is on this recording. Stevie's tone, even just the simplicity of this semi-muted strumming with the wah pedal, is a thing of beauty. It's clean and easy to hear. It's articulate and enjoyable, and thankfully it runs almost 8 minutes long, so there's plenty to soak up. The kick drum in the intro has plenty of punch and bass depth, and its tonality is in great contrast to the toms that accompany it with their much sharper attack. Once again, a measure of reverb that doesn't distract, but does reward the discerning listener that the engineer was keenly aware of how this band should sound. The bass guitar rhythm is full and rich without ever being sloppy or boomy. It carries the song until the end, keeping the movement and the groove exactly where it should be as Stevie pulls off some of the coolest chops that ever came from a guitar. The sound in this track is simply huge. I'd thought long and hard on how better to articulate that, but nothing else really works. It's that big. While not necessarily my favorite song, although it's up there, from a recording perspective, I do indeed think that Tin Pan Alley is the best track on the entire album. The full range of dynamics is showcased at its finest here, better than anywhere else on the record, and I'd put it up against the greatest recordings you could find. During some of the quiet passages of the piece, and if you pay attention and know what you're listening for, you can actually hear the hum of the single coil pickups in the Fender Stratocaster. For me, this was a special bonus because of how much I identify with that sound. Leaving it in the mix and not trying to compress it or edit it out reminds me how much feel music used to have in the studio before it was quantized and digitized into sterility. The breathiness of the vocals also stand out here more than anywhere on the album. There are quiet plosives that, while they don't ruin the performance, do give you the reminder of how real and live this performance was. You can hear how close to the microphone Stevie was to make the low, soft registers appear, and then just as easily you can practically see how he would rear his head back when it was time to bellow out a line from the diaphragm. I was drawn in again and again by these sorts of things and never let down. The last song I want to talk about is the second to last track, Honeybee. While this song is a shorter number, and musically it's just as solid as the rest of the album, there were a couple of things I heard on this pressing that stood out to me. In the very beginning, you can hear the faintest of sounds of a guitar being played before SRV kicks in. It's so faint and so quick that if you're not paying attention, you might miss it. My best guess of what this could be is that we're hearing bleed through from Stevie's headphones in the studio. Perhaps from a scratch track he put down earlier, or perhaps it was during his recording of the vocal track and we're hearing the music backing. But just the fact that it's audible is impressive. It gives you the briefest glimpses into what could have been happening and lets your imagination run wild as you hypothesize about what it could be and how wonderful it would have been able to be present during this recording session. In the unboxing video for this album, I asked the question, how much is too much for a new record? I'd stated that with the quality of the Dire Straits album I'd purchased, that I wouldn't hesitate to spend $50 on a record of that quality, but I wasn't sure about spending $125. So, how much is too much? Well, for my situation, it would seem that it's over $125 because I would happily spend that again on another one-step pressing. Now, to be sure, it absolutely need to be a record that I love and I will play again and again. But if that's the case, such as Texas Flood, which I'm already hunting down on the secondary market, I would not hesitate at all. But would I recommend that to you? Well, I take you back to the beginning of this video and say, it depends. If you're unsure if you'd hear a difference, if you're unsure if you should spend that kind of money, if you're unsure your current hi-fi system is up to par, then perhaps no. Maybe wait until later down the road when you find yourself more certain of these things. If, however, you have the funds and the passion for the band or artist who made the album, I would say yes. Do yourself the favor of picking up a one-step pressing and treating yourself to some of the finest recorded music you're likely to ever hear. So what do you think? On which side of the fence do you reside? I'd absolutely like to know, so please leave a comment in our ever-growing and extremely helpful comment section and tell us what you think. I appreciate you stopping back by to check out the review of this album, and I look forward to next time.